Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with the latest from the campaign trail for Donald Trump last night. It ran through the heart of Manhattan.
An incredible arena, Madison Square Garden, incredible.
The former president capped off a nearly 6-hour rally inside the fabled arena and called on his supporters to defeat Kamala Harris.
With your vote in this election, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country.
And Donald Trump was joined by about 24 speakers, including Elon Musk, who made a promise of his own to Trump transition co-chair Howard Lutnick.
How much do you think we can rip out of this wasted $6.5 trillion Harris-Biden budget?
Well, I think we can do at least $2 trillion.
Yeah!
And the rally included some controversial comments as well, like this from comedian Tony Hinchcliffe.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay, all right.
Now, that drew a backlash from Republican lawmakers in Florida and Puerto Rican celebrities, including rapper Bad Bunny and Jennifer Lopez, who is of Puerto Rican descent. They showed support for Kamala Harris following that comment.
Well, Nathan, Vice President Harris is seizing on the anti-Puerto Rico rhetoric from the Trump rally.
He abandoned the island, tried to block aid after back-to-back devastating hurricanes, and offered nothing more than paper towels and insults.
Kamala Harris announced a plan to boost the island territory's economy and power grid in a post on X. Earlier, the vice president held a rally of her own in Philadelphia.
We have an opportunity before us to turn the page on the fear and the divisiveness that have characterized our politics for a decade because of Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris plans to deliver what her campaign is calling her closing argument speech tomorrow. She'll appear at the Ellipse outside the White House, the same spot where Donald Trump rallied supporters before the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021.
Well, Karen, oil is tumbling this morning. It is down nearly 5% in the international market. The drop comes after Israeli strikes against targets in Iran avoided the OPEC members' crude facilities. Bloomberg's Paul Wallace reports that is fueling optimism. Hostilities in the Middle East may be easing.
A lot of regional officials in the Middle East and probably beyond in the West as well are thinking that this seems to be the end of it for now, at least. Based on Iran's reaction so far, it's been a pretty muted reaction. The country is not vowing to respond to Israel's strikes. Yes, 4 of its soldiers were killed, but the damage didn't seem to be massive. And of course, Israel seemed to have left Iran's oil and nuclear sites untouched. So I think a lot of people are looking at this and saying, okay, Iran seems happy to draw a line under this and move on.
Bloomberg's Paul Wallace says the Israeli strike avoided oil, nuclear, and civilian infrastructure in Iran, and that was in line with a request from the Biden administration.
Well, turning to the markets now, Nathan. Earnings will be front and center, and this week's focus will shift to big tech. We get a preview from Bloomberg's Charlie Pillett.
Tuesday, it's Google parent Alphabet. Wednesday, it's Meta Platforms and Microsoft, and then Apple and Amazon after the bell on Thursday. Kate Moore is head of thematic strategy at BlackRock. She says it's all about the outlook.
The big thing I'm watching, though, is not the results from the third quarter, but I'm maniacally focused on the guidance companies are giving for the fourth quarter and for 2025.
Also this week, Advanced Micro Devices, Caterpillar, ExxonMobil, Ford, McDonald's, and UBS. In New York, Charlie Pillett, Bloomberg Radio.
Charlie, thanks. Another company we're watching, of course, is Boeing. The plane maker plans to launch a capital raise as early as today. Let's get the latest from Bloomberg's John Tucker. So, John, how much are we talking here?
Yeah, the company's set to raise more than $15 billion, Nathan. Boeing's advisors have been lining up the potential investors. The transaction likely to include shares as well as debt that can be converted into equity. Now, to put this in perspective, a $15 billion share sale would be the largest equity offering since 2020. Well, Boeing needs money to keep its investment-grade credit rating and to fund any eventual turnaround from the crippling strike. The company's on pace to use around $4 billion in cash during the fourth quarter, while the plane maker expects to continue burning cash through the first half of next year as well. The Boeing factory workers voted last week to reject the company's latest contract offer, which included a wage increase of 35% spread over 4 years. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. Now to the latest on the health scare at McDonald's. The fast food giant says quarter pounders will return to menus at all restaurants this week after ruling out beef patties as a source of a multi-state E. coli outbreak that has sickened dozens and left one person dead. The E. coli infections appear to stem from the slivered onions served on top of the hamburger. The company had stopped selling the burgers in about 20% of its more than 13,000 U.S. restaurants. They will return without onions.
Eli Lilly expects to start selling its highly popular weight loss drug in Hong Kong as early as the end of this year. Lilly's shot's already been approved in mainland China for weight loss and diabetes, but it remains unclear when it plans to launch the product in the country. Its rival Novo Nordisk is already selling its diabetes drug in Hong Kong and mainland China, but its weight loss version has not been made available yet.
And Nathan, the yen has weakened to a 3-month low after Japan's ruling coalition failed to win a majority in parliament. The country now faces a period of political instability as its two main blocs race to form a government. Bloomberg's Paul Jackson in Tokyo says this outcome was a risk the prime minister took in calling this election.
This was a big gamble to call an early election, hoping that a kind of new leader popularity bump might give him a mandate to lead the party over the coming years. Instead, what he's ended up with is the worst result for the ruling coalition since 2009. So now he's got to pick up the pieces.
And Bloomberg's Paul Jackson says Prime Minister Ishiba promised to take responsibility for restoring political stability following the loss. According to Japan's constitution, a special session of parliament must be held within 30 days of a general election to choose a prime minister. And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Sentencing in Washington, D.C. today for a Hollywood actor who pleaded guilty to being part of the January 6th breach of the U.S. Capitol. Jay Johnston pleaded guilty to a felony count of civil disorder back in January. Johnston is arguably the most famous, having appeared in Bob's Burgers and Arrested Development. Prosecutors will ask for 18 months in prison for Johnston, saying he was part of that mob that day. Johnston will seek leniency. His defense lawyer says he has lost work over this. Pro-Western opposition parties in Georgia are crying foul at Saturday's parliamentary elections that leave pro-Moscow parties with a majority, with surveys showing a vast majority of Georgians wanting to join the European Union. Observers fanned across Georgia. The head of the European delegation, Antonio Lopez Iturralde White, says irregularities were detected by observers.
We express deep concern about the democratic backsliding in Georgia. We fear that the climate of hatred and intimidation that was also mentioned before we witnessed on the election day could seriously undermine the political process in Georgia.
Georgia's president, who wants to join the EU, says her country was a victim of a Russian special operation trying to alter the outcome. A new bank rate study confirms what many families already know: child care is expensive. Analyst Alex Gailey says there are important websites parents can use to find financial assistance for child care and local providers.
Childcare.gov can take you to your state's website, and that is a great resource to go to find out more about where you can get financial assistance and find childcare in your state.
Gailey also recommends checking with local county and state offices to see what services, tax breaks, or financial opportunities are available in their area for childcare. The survey found the most expensive states for childcare were New York, New Mexico, and Hawaii. The least expensive were South Dakota, North Dakota, and Utah. Finally, a recent study ranks the best cities for trick-or-treaters to experience Halloween. The comparison of cities that provide an exciting yet safe Halloween are found in a report from the website Wallet Hub. The top Halloween cities: New York, Jersey City, Miami, and Las Vegas. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. Here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. World Series in the Bronx. First time in 15 years. One question going into tonight's Game 3 was answered yesterday. The Dodgers say Shohei Ohtani good to go, despite the shoulder injury suffered late in Game 2. Now we'll see about possible changes in the Yankee lineup. Austin Wells 4 for 41 in the postseason with 18 strikeouts. Alex Verdugo 1 for his last 17. 10 teams have come back from being down 2-0 in the World Series. In fact, it's happened the last 2 times these teams have met. Anthony Rizzo knows only once has a team come back from 3-0 down.
This team has no quit, so the biggest thing is we win that game Monday. The pressure goes to the other side, and you make this a series.
Yanks will start Clark Schmidt. Dodgers go with Walker Buehler. Giants will be playing at the same time in Pittsburgh, and you can hear the game on Bloomberg Radio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 has Giants-Steelers tonight, starting with the pregame at 6:30. The Jets' fifth straight loss, 25-22 at New England. The Patriots scored the winning touchdown on a fourth down run with 22 seconds left. It's the Pats' first win since Week 1. Upset of the day was in Cleveland. Browns beat the Ravens 29-24 to end a 5-game losing streak. It was ending Baltimore's 5-game win streak. No question about the best finish of the day. That was in Washington. The Bears had taken their first lead with 25 seconds left. One last chance for the Commanders.
Here comes the Hail Mary with the game on the line. And the ball is caught! Caught! It's a miracle! It's Noah Brown! Oh my goodness! This town is going crazy!
Call on CBS. Washington won 18-15 last night. The 49ers outscored the Cowboys 21-0 in the third quarter and beat Dallas 30-24. The Nets home opener, a 115-102 win over Milwaukee. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager. With 8 days to go until Election Day, both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are honing their closing arguments in the final stretch of an airtight presidential campaign.
We're going to defeat Kamala Harris, and we're going to win back the beautiful White House.
Turn the page on that same old tired playbook because we are exhausted with it.
The vice president rallied her supporters last night in Philadelphia, while the former president held a marathon event in the heart of his hometown at New York's Madison Square Garden. For more, we are joined this morning by Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. Bill, good morning. The former president promised a spectacle at the storied arena. What were some of your takeaways?
Well, it definitely was a spectacle. I mean, it's starting with basically 6 hours in length there at Madison Square Gardens, kind of an iconic venue for a political rally. I don't think Donald Trump's remarks are probably what's going to be remembered most from it. He gave he said a lot of the things that are common about in his stump speeches, but I think what's really drawn a lot of attention are some of the speakers who came before him. There was quite a number of people who are well known to Trump supporters and conservative audiences. Tucker Carlson was there. Dr. Phil made an appearance supporting Trump. But there were a lot of comments, including some by a comedian who was there, that have been really taken to task overnight. A lot of insulting Puerto Rico, saying it's a floating island of garbage. That has been latched upon by a lot of Harris supporters, prominent Puerto Ricans in the United States, saying that that reflects how the Trump campaign views the island and views Puerto Ricans. Interestingly enough, outside of Florida, which has the largest population of Puerto Ricans in the continental U.S., the second largest group is in Pennsylvania, so one of the key battleground states. So nobody knows at this point if that will make much of a difference in the election or not, but it's something that Harris supporters are talking a lot about overnight.
Yeah, and I guess Harris was talking about it herself with a post on X talking about a plan to boost the Puerto Rican economy and power grid. I mean, how could she potentially seize on this at a time when just a few days ago, former President Trump was in the Sun Belt trying to court Latino voters?
Yeah, it's hard. This election, the results will get sliced and diced 1,000 ways, and it's hard to know what moves the needle at this point. But it is kind of interesting that Trump's event was marked by these comments at the same time that Kamala Harris was out talking to Latino business owners and voters in Philadelphia. So whether everyone is trying to get any type of little extra edge they can in these final days. They obviously need to turn out their core supporters, but they're trying to build on that and trying to lure some of those relatively few undecided voters at this point. And these are the kind of things that, if Harris ends up winning, people will be looking at the Pennsylvania results to see if that mattered. And if Trump wins, they'll be looking at some of these other things that have happened at the end stages of the campaign to see if that made the difference.
In our last minute, Bill, we also heard from Elon Musk on the stage, one of former President Trump's biggest supporters financially, certainly, promising to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget if he joins the Trump administration. Is that realistic?
It's hard to see where how that gets through. He was responding to a question from Cantor Fitzgerald's CEO Howard Lutnick, who said how much could he rip out of the budget that Biden and Harris last proposed, and he said, as you mentioned, $2 trillion. I mean, right now, Trump's economic pitch to voters has largely been on tax cuts, whether it's tax cuts for tips, tax cuts for home caregivers, things like that. There hasn't been a lot of talk about new revenue. And so the cost of those tax cuts over the coming decade, estimated in the trillions, to add $2 trillion to that, it's hard to imagine where that comes when half the budget is defense and things like that. So going to be tough to find it.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.